Hello, my good people. Welcome to my healthy talk show today. My name is Dominic, and welcome as we engage on a healthy talk today. And our topic today is about recurrent vulvovaginal candidiasis or vaginal candidiasis. Others call it yeast infection, or you can as well call it fungal infection. So basically, this is a condition which affects women and as well as men, but it's a common condition among the women. So let's straight go to the main topic today as we engage on one of these conditions that basically affect women now and again. So as a woman, you may have had an episode of yeast infection once or twice, but when it becomes recurrent, it becomes a major problem basically. So a recurrent yeast infection can be so much troublesome. It can also be stressful because of visiting hospital and again for treatment, and as well as causing a lot of discomfort, especially on the genital areas. So we are going to look at in terms of the definition of yeast infection, the causes, the symptoms, and how we can treat it and even prevent it. So basically, we shall start with a definition. Basically, as how to define this, we can say that healthy vagina basically contains what we call bacteria and some yeast cells. That is very, very normal. The vagina contains yeast cells and bacteria which are normally on the vaginal canal. And these bacteria, we call them normal bacteria or good bacteria, as well as normal yeast cells. But when these cells multiply or over multiply, they may end up causing discomforts, the likes of vaginal itchiness, the likes of irritation of the genital areas, and even sometimes discharge. When this happens, then it results into a yeast infection. So basically, yeast infection or vaginal candidiasis is caused by a fungi or by a fungus, not a bacteria. That is a very important point to note. It's caused by a yeast, or rather a fungi, by the name Candida albicans. So this is the main cause of what we call vaginal candidiasis. So having defined these conditions, we now engage on what we call the main symptoms that can make you suspect that you could be having a yeast infection. One of the main symptoms of yeast infection is what we call itching. When we talk of itching here, basically we mean the itching on the genital area, basically around the vaginal area. We call it around the vulva. The vulva basically is the place or the part around the outer area of the vagina. It contains the part of the clitoris, part of the labias, and even the outer part of the vaginal opening. That is what we call the vulva. So if there is a lot of itching on these areas, that is one of the main symptoms that you could be having a yeast infection. Another main symptom basically is what we call discharge, vaginal discharge. So a vaginal discharge can be of different colors and even texture. So we do have normal vaginal discharge sometimes, which happen especially during ovulation, and but we do have now the abnormal discharge, basically the whitish, the brownish, or yellowish. If you do have this kind of discharge, which is associated with vaginal itching and sometimes which has a foul smell, or others call it a fishy smell, That is one of the main symptoms that you could be having a yeast infection. So those two symptoms are the main ones for a yeast infection. That is vulvar itching and vaginal discharge. However, vaginal discharge can as well be due to other conditions. Sometimes STIs, sometimes urinary tract infection can as well be caused, or rather can bring about the discharge. So it's always good to know that there could be different conditions that can cause vaginal discharge. So, having said about the symptoms, now let us look at the causes. What are the main causes of a yeast infection? There are a number of them, but we may need to look at the main causes of yeast infection. One of the main causes, as we had said, is the main cause is Candida albicans, which is a fungal infection for that case. But now, what brings about these Candida albicans? One of it is what we call high level of estrogen hormone. This is very important, especially for those women who always complain of having yeast infection every time they are having or they are reported to receive their menses, or during the menses, or even after the menses. During this time, there is high levels of estrogen hormone. This estrogen hormone basically it makes the albicans, that is the yeast infection, to overgrow, or rather the Candida albicans to overgrow. It acts actually as it's like a catalyst. It speeds up the overgrowth of these yeast infection or yeast cells. This can cause now the itchiness, the discharge, and others. So if you are having if you are having yeast infections basically around the time you are having your periods, basically that's due to high level of estrogen. So that is clear. Number two, it's what we call antibiotics. Another very important point to note. Many times people just buy antibiotics over the counter when they suspect they could be having an infection of which they don't know whether it's yeast or bacteria. So you end up treating a bacterial infection which you don't have. And when you are treating something you don't have, you may end up causing a different problem. So antibiotics can trigger yeast infection. Why? How does this happen? Basically, when you take a lot of antibiotics, they kill the normal flora, what you call good bacteria around the genital area. This good bacteria, we call it lactobacillus. Lactobacillus is the good bacteria. So if you take a lot of antibiotics, it's able to reduce this lactobacillus or even kill it completely, or rather rendering you into getting yeast infection. So always do antibiotics when you are certain of what you're treating, especially after you've been tested or you've done tests to ascertain that you have a bacterial infection. Another cause of yeast infection is pregnancy. It's not really a cause, but it's a predisposing factor. Women who are pregnant are more prone into having yeast infections other than non-pregnant women. This is because of hormones, as well as we have said above. When hormones changes during pregnancy, it predisposes women into having yeast infections recurrently. Another main cause is what we call diabetes. For those people who are diabetic and their blood sugars are not well controlled, they end up getting yeast infection. This is because when the blood sugar is uncontrolled, blood sugar, or rather yeast infections, or yeast cells thrive well in a sugary environment. So if you have blood sugar which is not well controlled, you end up getting a recurrent yeast infection. Another main cause is what we call immune system, compromised immune system. People who have different immune system which is compromised, especially people who are either HIV positive and has some other viral infections which reduce immunity in the body, can also predispose someone into having recurrent yeast infection. Another main cause is what we call poor hygiene. Very, very important. We do have some women basically whose hygiene is so wanting. Maybe the way they take a shower, what they use in terms of underpants and all that. Maybe they're not able to wash them well, they're not able to share well, so they predispose themselves into this kind of yeast infection. Also, eating habits, another important factor. Some women like eating a lot of sugary foods, sugary stuff, sugary snacks and all this. As we have already said that a sugar environment favors thriving of bacteria and yeasts. So if you take a lot of sugary foods, your body may end up getting a lot of sugars and hence predispose yourself to these kind of infections. So these are just among the few among the main causes of yeast infections. So having identified the main causes, now we need to look at how are you able to treat these infections and as well as do preventive measures. So when it comes to treatment, you need to identify what might be the trigger. What is the cause? Because if you identify the cause, you are able to treat this infection well. But if you're not able to identify the cause, sometimes you may treat it empirically, where you just treat the symptomatically. But basically, we advise that you first do a test to ascertain whether you are having actually a bacterial infection or you are having a yeast infection. So for this case, we advise that you do urine cyst test. You can do HVS test. This is we call it high vaginal swab. So when you do this, you are able to identify whether you are having bacteria or you are having yeast. If you have both, you can be able to take antibiotics and antifungals. But if you have a yeast infection, then antibiotics are not required at all. Next thing when it comes to treatment is what we call medications. Oral antifungals is basically what is required to treat yeast infection. So you can use oral antifungals, that in terms of tablets. You can use pessaries. We have antifungal which are pessaries. Basically, these are pessaries. When you talk about pessaries, we mean the ones which are inserted intravaginally. You can as well use antifungal creams, which is used to basically apply on your areas, that is the vulval area, especially when there is a lot of itching. As well as we always advise that people take probiotics. Probiotics basically they help in restoring the normal flora. So if you've been doing a lot of antibiotics, basically it's always important that you take probiotics once in a while so that you are able to create or rather maintain the normal flora of the vaginal area, as well as treat the main cause or rather treat the underlying problem. For example, if somebody is diabetic and is having a yeast infection, how much you are treating the yeast infection, try to as well treat the underlying cause, control the blood sugars, and you are able to control the yeast infection. So as I always say, prevention is better than cure. Always do much of preventive measures and you'll be able to calm this kind of infection, which actually becomes a menace every other time you're in and out of hospital due to a yeast infection. So towards the end, I say thank you so much for watching and listening to me. Next time I'll be doing another topic which is more about what are the reproductive problems, especially which is affecting both men and women. So I urge you to subscribe to my YouTube channel by the name Seymour Dominic, as well as follow me on Facebook by the same name, as we educate each other on different medical conditions. Thank you for listening to me, and thank you for watching.